All right, Marie, stand by. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our Select Board meeting for December 9th. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a little bit of a smaller board tonight. It is a interim meeting that we put together since we had to cancel due to a snow day last Monday. And December 16th is going to be a very busy night. So we tried to move a few things up. Thank you for everyone who's coming in to present tonight on this special night. I want to begin with announcements. Lynn?
Great, thanks. So tomorrow is the go live date for Westcom. This will, that was the last minute preparation and data transfers, and then beginning at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, Westcom will be live, which means that the police department will not have someone there staffing the lobby area outside of normal business hours. So, but there will be an intercom that you will connect with directly to Westcom if you need someone. And there's more information that was put out today on the Facebook page, and some question and answers were also put up. This Wednesday and Saturday are the last 2 days for the recycling of old trash barrels. This is for the Department of Public Works. There's more information on the town website. Last week was leaf drop-off, and the curbside leaf pickup was supposed to be Saturday the 7th, but due to all the snow that we had last week, that got pushed till the 14th, so that this coming Saturday. And again, there's information on that on the town website and also on the Facebook page. Tonight, the classification hearing had been scheduled for the last meeting, December 2nd, but that was rescheduled to December 16th because of last week's snow. And on Tuesday, the public is invited to the unveiling of a street sign for Jim Russell Way. That will begin at noon tomorrow. This is at the Adult Center, and following that, there'll be light refreshments. So anyone is welcome to attend. And lastly, there's a vacancy on the planning board, and any town resident is qualified to serve. And you can fill out an application. They're due by January 2nd. We ask that you submit a cover letter and resume at the same time. There's more information on the website and Facebook. It's a good way to try out a position because the term will end for this role June 2020 at the next annual town election. So if you do want more information, you can certainly reach out to the Select Board office or check the town website and Facebook page. And there's links to the application on there as well. And those would be due January 2nd for appointment at the Monday, January 6th joint meeting of Planning Board and Select Board.
Thank you. Any announcements from the Select Board?
I have a couple having to do with our streetlights. Last week, as we earlier announced, our town manager, Lynn Simmons, signed the purchase agreement. We now own all the streetlights in the town of Long Meadow, so don't call Eversource. They won't fix the lights anymore. We're responsible for doing that. We do have a service contract in place, so you'll start seeing something on our website, but call the DPW. The other thing I just wanted to let the other members of the Select Board know is that today we had a conference call with our consultant that the bids have come in on the first part of the streetlight, the new streetlights, the so-called Cobra heads, which are the traditional hang over the street type lights. Paul and I think I said at the last meeting, we'd gone through preliminary budget and tried to see if we had enough money for doing the job based on what was appropriate, and we had estimated about $90,000 for the purchase of Cobra heads, and the bids right now are coming in substantially below that, or at least below that. So I think we're in good shape. The questions we need to evaluate. We had some help from our consultant. We'll continue to work on this in the next couple of days because some of the lights, as they described it to us, as much light goes up as goes down, and we really want the lights, most of the light concentrated on the streets, that kind of stuff. Some of them are a little bit flaky in terms of potentially their service, and so we're going to be looking pretty closely at the bids over the next few days. And but I want to thank Lynn, Paul, and folks who have been helping out because it's worked really well. It looks like we're going to move forward with that in a pretty direct manner.
Any other comments or right, I have one comment I wanted. We had a resident, two residents write a letter, which I think is a commendation letter. Every now and then it's nice to have those to accommodate people who are working in town. We're writing to provide a commendation and a message of well done to you for the Fire Chief John Dearborn and Building Commissioner Paul Healy's contribution to resolving the Magnolia Circle fire situation earlier this year. Both John and Paul were instrumental and provided valuable follow-up to the 64 Magnolia Circle residence fire in April 2019. John and the fire crew responded quickly and effectively to a near fully involved structure fire and worked diligently to protect the surrounding homes, including ours, and suppress the fire. Following the blaze, there was quite a mess remaining, and Paul coordinated with the other town departments, worked to ensure the remaining debris and mess were soon cleaned up and removed. As a neighbor to 64 Magnolia Circle, I have some insight into having a collaborative and cooperative relationship with the homeowner, and I'm certain both John and Paul provided appropriate diplomacy and persistence to their communications for getting the building cleaned up. Cleanup crew on site in August. We're all quite pleased to see Associated Building Records package and the debris quickly removed and grade the lot. Overall, a great job, and again, we're thankful to have this completed. Thank you for their valuable contributions to resolving this neighborhood situation. Often when there is a fire or crisis in town, we forget how much work really occurs afterwards, and want to thank the employees and everyone who worked hard to resolve this matter. And that was from John and Mary Schoonmaker. Thank you. Are there any resident comments? No? All right, I'm just going to go quickly into a statement I've written. Something happened today. I wanted to be sure to inform the public. I'd like to report on the latest development on the building of a meter station by Tennessee Gas Pipeline and the distribution connection by Columbia Gas on the Long Meadow Country Club property. In May, town meeting passed a bylaw regulating and monitoring such a facility by the town of Long Meadow. In August, in a special town meeting, a bylaw was passed to prohibit building this facility in a residential area. The Attorney General recently approved the May bylaw with the exception of the fines that would be paid if the facility failed to follow the regulations and monitoring requirements. The bylaw also made the Planning Board the permitting authority. The Attorney General has requested additional time before making a decision on the August zoning bylaw. I would like to clear up some misconceptions. The May bylaw that was approved does not stop the building of a facility. Even if the August bylaw is approved by Attorney General, Tennessee Gas Pipeline could very well still build their facility at the Long Meadow Country Club using federal preemption. Under the approved bylaw, the Planning Board cannot deny a permit to Tennessee Gas Pipeline if they follow the requirements of the bylaw. The bylaw gives us a tool to monitor and protect the health and safety of the residents. The Long Meadow Select Board has hired a legal team that specializes in working with gas companies who are building new facilities. We've also hired a well-known expert who is an engineer. He's testified in legal cases involving gas utility facilities and safety issues. The past 5 months, we've been trying to obtain basic plans and schematics on the plant facility in order to create and fund an emergency management program before the building of the facility. We have not received the information we've requested. Columbia Gas is following an updated long-range plan with the Department of Public Utilities. We directed our legal team to file a motion to intervene to become full parties to the hearing. With this status, we can request discovery and ask questions of Columbia Gas under oath. Unfortunately, this appears to be the only way we can be assured to obtain the information we need in a timely manner. Columbia Gas objected to our motion, but this afternoon we were granted full party status. I want to thank our legal team of Jeffrey Bernstein and Rebecca Zakas from BCK Law. We are also the only non-governmental agency who has been granted full party status in this hearing. Again, I want to manage expectations. Becoming a full party does not give us a path to stop building the facility. Hopefully, it gives us a voice in the long-range plan of Columbia Gas and provides us with a platform that guarantees we receive more information that we have been receiving from Columbia Gas and the long-range plan, the public utilities who will serve as a conduit for the flow of this information to town. Thank you. Is there a further report on anything from the town manager tonight? No. Okay. It is an interim meeting. We'll go right to work, and we'd like to invite the library to come up here, and we have a new agreement that we're signing.
Thank you, Marie. I didn't realize I am the library.
Yes, or your whole contingent.
I am Mary Rognes, the president of the Board of Trustees of Strauss Library. And I will add another commendation to the letter you read. Thank you to the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board, excuse me, through your leadership, Marie, and Mark, through yours before, because we started working on this last year. But we have the agreement, the Select Board signed it at a meeting in October, I believe. But because of scheduling of our meetings and the different timetable, the Library Board just did it. And so it just gave me the authority to sign for the board. I would like to have the other board members who are here come up too, just
Yes.
to witness. Well, not to really witness, but we do need 2 witnesses.
And I also want to thank Tom Lakusha. He was disappointed he couldn't be here tonight
Yes.
because he was your direct liaison in this whole project.
Tom was. And it's just been wonderful to get this finalized, to restore the integrity that was intended when the 10 acres of property were given to the Library Corporation by Miss Sarah Storrs before she died, or in her will, in 1907.
Wow.
So I will sign this. Then we will be all set.
You gonna take a picture?
3 copies.
We should probably take a picture, yeah. That's a good idea, Richard.
No, Pete, land inspector, going click, click, click.
Marie's gonna, Jean's gonna.
In
Well,
full-
we want you in it, Jean, so you stand next to them.
Look.
You should be in them.
Everybody here is sitting
Yeah,
with a
you
camera.
have steady
Yeah,
hand.
we
I
all got
tend to-
cameras.
Okay, who's gonna do this?
Oh, you
Everybody.
need 2 witnesses from us, is that it?
Well, there have to be,
We
there
can't
should be.
witness it.
No.
We've got a couple of reasonable people who might be able to do that. John.
Should we bring in
John,
legal?
come on up.
Oh, yes, that's a very reliable witness.
Congratulations.
Do you need one more?
One more. I did already.
You want to come up? Yes, we'll go full authority.
Yes, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, but I didn't have the other chief sign all 3, so you'll have, John, I think you need 2 more. Oh,
You didn't know you'd be put to work.
Multiple copies, yeah.
okay.
Well, I want to thank the hard work that was done with the library and the Board of Trustees, because I know this had been hanging out there for many years, and you were persistent saying, we have to have a agreement that matches what we're doing, and it's an important group in town. I mean, how many people tell me your numbers are amazing every single month, and the activities that are occurring. So it's a
Yeah.
beloved institution, and thank you
okay.
for working so
Well,
hard
thanks,
for
Marie.
it.
And the difference between, there won't be a lot of difference in the way things work, but the reality is that it's not a public library in the usual sense of the word. Springfield has Springfield Public Library. East Longmeadow has East Longmeadow Public Library. We have the Richard Salter Storrs Library, which is free public library for the town, but there are responsibilities that the trustees have, and those are now re-recognized, and we're glad to have that going forward.
Well, thank you again for all you've done.
Signed and sealed. One for you, one for us, and one for history, I guess.
One to go in the
Well,
library, I guess.
Debbie, do you need a copy for the minutes?
I will take them in.
It's just the signature page.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I'm going to skip down and ask the audit people, if they, auditors, and the audit committee.
The audit people, huh?
Yes.
Tanya Campbell from Melanson and Heath, partner, and handled the account for Long Meadow, and doing a great job. Heading into our third year of the engagement. Pete Landon, Meadowbrook.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight to present the results of the town's fiscal year 2019 audit. Before we get into kind of the financial statements and some of the key numbers there and the management letter, I wanted to give a brief reminder that an audit is not designed to examine everything. We don't pour through every single transaction that passes through the town during the fiscal year. An audit does not provide 100% assurance that everything is looked at or that everything is functioning, 100% properly. Instead, an audit is conducted under a set of standards known as government auditing standards. And those standards require that we plan and perform our audit using a concept known as materiality. Now, materiality will vary based on the size of the town. And in fiscal year 2019, materiality for your general fund, or your main operating fund, was about $120,000. That doesn't mean we don't look at anything below that amount, because we certainly do. It just means that auditing standards say we should focus our testing on balances at or above that level. Now, in terms of the presentation tonight, I wasn't going to make you guys kind of sift through the actual financial statements themselves. If you do have any specific questions, though, from your review of the financial statements, please feel free to ask. I wanted to just touch on some of the key numbers. I spent a couple hours with the audit committee last month, and we did a much deeper dive, but I just kind of wanted to touch on the basics here. At the end of 2019, the town had approximately $2.5 million in your undesignated balance in your general fund. Now, the undesignated or balance in the general fund is essentially what's left after you've set aside all your reserves. So if you've said you're going to spend this much money on, this technology project, things like that, all that gets set aside, and then what you have left is $2.5 million. That's essentially the starting point for the town's free cash calculation, and that represents about 4% of the town's annual operating budget. It's a little on the low side. I mean, it would be better if that number was a little bit bigger. Obviously, the bigger the better for that kind of thing. But it did increase about $700,000 from the past fiscal year. So that is, a good sign. In addition to that, the town had about $4 million in your general stabilization fund at the end of the fiscal year. And that number is about 6% of the town's annual operating budget. So it's a very healthy balance. That also did increase about $500,000 from the prior year as well, because the town does, make a concerted effort to put money into that fund every year from free cash. So it's a really good practice, and I've said it in prior years as well, but that's a very healthy balance for a town your size. In terms of some of the key liabilities for the town, at the end of 2019, the town had a net pension liability of about $48.5 million. If you recall, the net pension liability is the town's share of the Hampden County Retirement System's unfunded liability. That liability actually increased about $4 million over the past year from 2018. The town's share didn't really change. It stayed around 12%. The town represents about 12% of the total liability, but the funded status of their system actually decreased from 51% down to 47% during that year. So with that decrease in the funding percentage, your liability increased. Not really a whole lot the town can do about that. In terms of what those numbers look like, that the town does have a funding schedule, and at some point that the goal is to have that 100% funded. But with the results of operations for the system itself, and some of the assumptions from the actuary, there's really, you really have no control over that number. That is just, it is what it is, and that's what gets booked every year. One of the other key liabilities is the net OPEB liability. And at the end of 2019, that liability was about $40 million. Now, there's no requirement to fund that liability at this time, unlike your net pension liability. But the town has established an OPEB trust fund, and there was about $2.6 million in that fund at the end of 2019. That liability actually decreased about $2.5 million from the prior year. And the main reason for that change was because the town changed how the OPEB trust fund was invested. In 2018, it was invested primarily in certificates of deposit, which, as everyone knows, provides very little rate of return. In 2019, the town moved the investments into the state retirement pool. And as a result of that, the actuary increased the investment rate of return, so your liability decreased on a long-term basis. So that's good, and that should, continue to improve. One of the things we've seen in the past year or so from having discussions with other cities and towns is bond rating agencies are really focusing on that liability now. Back when the standard came about and towns were first required to book that liability, if you'd set up an OPEB trust fund and kind of thrown some money into it, it was fine. And now they're really looking to see that you have a funding policy and you're actually contributing not a substantial amount to that liability, but it's a $40 million liability. So, and it's not going anywhere. So they're really looking for towns to make a decent contribution into that trust fund every year. And the town did contribute, I think, $400,000 in 2019. So that, that's good. I just want you guys to be aware that that is something that they're looking at a lot more closely now and really putting more focus on, I guess. So, does anyone have any questions on that? That's like the very abbreviated version of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, Tanya, I have a question. If we wanted to compare our OPEB liability to that of other communities, is there a metric like percentage of your overall budget or dollars per employee, or what metric would you think would make sense for us to
Right.
look at?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Budget's hard. It's retiree health insurance costs, and there are, active employees are factored into that as well. You could look at the dollar amount per employee. I've never really thought about it that way. The bond rating agencies might have some good data on that. I'm trying to think. I don't think the state really has. They don't gather that information as part of their database system themselves. It's really just reported in financial statements. So, I don't know. That's a good question. I can get back to you on some thoughts on that.
I'd be curious, just because
Yeah.
if we want to evaluate our, is that good? Obviously, $40 million deficit's not good anywhere, but
Right.
but how does it compare with other cities and
With other
towns
cities and
in the
towns.
Commonwealth?
Right, in terms of percent funded and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, and it all varies so much in terms of, there's some cities and towns that are fully funded and some that have barely put anything into them. So, no, I don't know.
If you could perhaps just look at some of the other communities that you may provide services for, it would be great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
part of the liability calculation too depends on how your funds are invested, which actuary you use, because everyone is slightly different in terms of how they interpret the rules and how they calculate the liability. It's not vastly different, but that can vary a lot. And what your health insurance costs are, and how much the town's responsible for. All those things vary so much from each place, so it makes it a little tricky to compare. But
Richard?
How much are we going up annually on that?
that liability actually went down this past year. As long as you continue putting money into your OPEB trust fund, theoretically that liability will go down, but every 2 years you get there's a new valuation. So they factor in, changes in enrollment, changes in health insurance costs, all these kind of things. So, I mean, it's going to kind of do this.
Did we just go through an evaluation then?
You didn't. Your liability went down because of how you're investing your
Right.
trust fund assets. So that changed what's known as the discount rate. Next year, you'll have a new valuation, and which may or may not change the different assumptions that are used in the valuation.
Crystal ball, I mean, it's a massive debt that's out there. And I wonder, of course, everybody at this board wonders the same thing.
Yeah.
When will it get to the point where it must be funded, to where we no longer have the option of just putting in 200,000 or 300, that we must put in X amount of dollars based on a formula coming in from the state?
Right.
Or from God knows where it's coming in, but somebody sooner or later is going to take a hold of this and say, you will protect your retirees.
That's true. I think there might be a little gun shy to do that now, considering you have the pension liability out there, and that doesn't seem to be, I don't know, it's not really decreasing, I don't think, as fast as most people are thinking it's decreasing, and that's all across the board in terms of all the systems,
Right,
from what
'cause
we've
you
seen.
you said the pension
So-
liability was 48.5, and there's another 40.
Right.
I mean, there is a certain point, I think, in everybody's financial mind where you say, this community is no longer solvent.
Right.
We run a pay-as-you-go basis for all those healthcare costs, so the funding is, I think the government, GASB, Accounting Standards Board, looked at forcing the liability on the balance sheet of individual cities and towns a number of years back, and that has taken the net worth of the town down considerably once you throw a liability on like that. And it was footnoted before. It's now footnoted for the OPEB liability, but it's as Tanya indicated, it's going to come up on the balance sheet, and probably, how do they bring it up in increments, Paul?
I think it's fully on there now.
It's fully on there now, yeah. When it first started, you booked a little bit each
Yeah,
year.
it's
and
caught up to that
starting-
point.
Yeah.
So that's why our net worth is, with those two combined liabilities, pretty much impaired. I mean, between the two, we're looking at $75 to $80 million in liability, but.
88.
Pardon?
The figure she just gave us, 88 million.
Right, yeah, right.
88.5 today.
Yeah.
But it gets down to cash flow on the, year to year, to the extent you're paying for your healthcare costs.
Right.
Because you get this funding issue on the side, and our $3.3 million that we pay on the pension each year includes a portion for getting at the liability, and the rest is actual expenses that are incurred by the pension plan itself.
The normal progression would say these funds are going to continue to increase.
Yeah.
People retire.
People do
Yeah.
retire.
Right. But
Rich, if we had if we had a funding schedule, a 20-year funding schedule, we'd probably have to put in about another $1 million per year in order to get on a proper schedule developed by an
And for
actuary.
which one's that? Is that for the?
That's only the OPEB.
For OPEB.
It's only the OPEB.
Yeah.
And what are the healthcare costs in total per year?
We budget $4 million plus, and then
Okay.
obviously the employees have probably $3 million.
It's cost of doing business.
Well, between the pension and the
Yes, it's in a
healthcare,
very
you're just talking
benefit-rich
about
state.
9 to 10 million in annual cost.
I think what you said today was very encouraging, though, because we dropped our OPEB liability by doing something other than just putting money away.
Right.
And that was going to the trust fund and changing the investment, like you
Right.
recommended, Paul. I think
Yeah.
maybe next year we'll find it might even drop further. Once we have the regional dispatch, we're going to have all those dispatchers now in a regional program and not directly on our OPEB liability. So there are other ways we can nibble at it, as well as putting away the funding that we're doing. So we'll just have to be creative going
Yeah.
forward, and maybe look at legislation to help us.
Yeah.
Mark?
And I think, from my perspective, we made an approach at the OPEB liability this year, and it was by investing, but the pension liability is just, it's up 8%. I mean, that's something we don't have a good handle on it. continue to question whether Hampden County Retirement Board is our friend in this process. Because the longer they go, every year they say, well, we'll be funded in 25 years, and the next year we'll be funded in 25 years, and the next year, and that's been going on for 5 or 6 years now, and it's never dropped to 24 years. And I'm just wondering if we should not be taking a look at pulling out of their investment process just, my understanding, and Paul's been to more meetings than I have, but is that, they invest it with the state, but then they take, after the state earns 7 or 8%, which is a good earning, they then use the money to run the Hampden County Retirement Board, so the net increase may be 2 or 3%, or in some cases less than, a loss. And so, I'm far more concerned about I really want to make sure that when Mr. Pasturzik retires in 10 years, that there's money there.
Oh, 10 years.
Well, he'll be OPEB.
Your dream.
You gotta get my money before that.
Well, he's also
I know he's
OPEB.
also OPEB, but I'm worried about his pension thing. But, and I think we ought to have that discussion. And one thing we haven't done is had the folks from the Hampden County Retirement Board come in here and talk to us as a board and tell us what they're doing with our money. It's.
Well, I believe they did that. They had someone come and present to you when you were chair.
And they didn't give us very good satisfactory
I think
information.
we have to look at legislation or changing the system, because these boards are all across, I think there were 11 or 12 boards across the Commonwealth.
But
and this
the
is
Hampden
system.
County happens to be doing amongst the not as good as many of the others, and I don't know why, but, for our liability going up 8% in a year when the stock market, for all measurements in 2018, and that our fiscal year 2018, the stock market did quite well, you would think we'd have held our own, and it's not like we had lots and lots of retirees that year increasing our liability. So, there's something to be said for it. We're not on the right track with the net pension process.
We had a pension task force back in the early 2000s that addressed the issue when we moved the money into the state fund. And Larry Starr, Dean Rogness, Ernie Welker, and a few others staffed that and made the recommendation to move the money to a professional investment outside of Hampden County Retirement Board. So what you're talking about now is the administrative side of it.
Right.
And I agree with you that that's worthy of maybe another task force would time to convene and look at it.
Thanks.
Yeah. Kind of a side note there, I think part of the reason the liability hasn't decreased as much as you would hope it would over the past few years is there's been, I think, continuing pressure on the actuaries for the retirement systems to kind of lower the rate of return on investments that they were projecting, just because they weren't coming anywhere close to getting those types of returns. So when you do that, even a small change in the rate of return can have such a large impact on a liability that big. So
people are
what they were
retiring early and living longer too. I get it.
There's so many things, but I think that's kind of, you're on a path, and then changing these assumptions can kind of skew that every few years. So
Yeah, I think they were basing
there's
on 8%, and they were told, you can't do that anymore, you got to be more reasonable. And even now, I think it went down to just 6 or 7. It was just, it's still not right where it needs to be.
Yeah, it's still not great, but it's much better than it was. So it's a little bit more realistic, I guess, in a way. But yeah, it's tough. And you, like I said, you have no real control over it.
I think our control is only over that number that we give them the 3rd week in September, which is our total salary.
Which is our payroll,
Total
participating payroll.
Yeah, which might go down this year with the dispatchers next September.
It would go down, a year from now. I don't know if it'll go down. It won't go up as high, maybe, given the volume of salaries.
Yeah.
And Marie, I know this isn't the time or place to do it, but I think we ought to discuss whether remaining in the Hampden County Retirement Board is in the best interest of the community. Like Peter said, we had a task force and they recommended we not do it. Now, just so people understand, I get it. Not only do they do the investment, which I'm criticizing, but they also do the administration, which we don't do ourselves, we're not prepared to do, which is sending out the checks and tracking people and determining eligibility. That administration can be extensive, but the fact that the stock markets are at all-time highs and we're not seeing that impact our returns on our pension investments is pretty disturbing.
Well, I think it's also a little dangerous to take the jump, because right now we're under the protected fictional umbrella of 7%, and they're allowed to be, right now I think it's going to be 2035, where we're finally going to be fully funded, and that is with the projection of 6 or 7%. And so
Probably
I think if we
6.75.
pulled out, our numbers could actually shoot up, saying you really have to contribute much more. So I think
But you can look at
maybe
that. I
we'll
mean,
get
there's-
some recommendations from Paul and see
They're
what
also
you
telling
think.
us that over that period of time, Maureen, we have to contribute 8% more every year.
It could be even more if we move out. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We have to be careful.
But it's worth looking at. I mean,
S&P's only up about 25% this year, so it's been a pretty poor year.
If you know how to do it, right?
Yeah, just put it in January and take it out the end of December, it's 25% right now, 23, 24.
Any recommendations or concerns?
We did issue a management letter. There was no material issues or deficiencies in the town's internal control based on the testing that we found. There was also really no new recommendations this year. I don't know, do you guys want to talk about those in detail? I mean, there's nothing that's really overly concerning.
Why don't you give us the top three?
Okay, well, I think there's only...
There's only
well,
four.
only four.
Four
so,
in total.
Okay. So the one issue that was noted as a current year issue this year is really because it was a partial repeat from a prior year combined with a new issue. And it had to do with developing a formal plan for your solid waste and your stormwater enterprise funds.
Oh, okay.
Now, in fiscal year 2019, the town, or like the general fund share of those funds was like 70 to 75%. So they're really not operating as true enterprise funds, because enterprise funds are supposed to operate like a business and cover all their costs. Now, I know there's a more formal plan put in place for the stormwater enterprise fund, and ultimately the rates will be raised enough to cover those costs. But because of the current year funding, we included it with the solid waste fund, which we had also noted in the prior year.
So our mini barrels did get us where we needed to be?
Not quite, not quite this year. So, we're just repeating that, recommendation from the prior year to, take a look at whether the solid waste fund really should be an enterprise fund or it should be absorbed into the general fund operations themselves. In terms of repeating some issues from the prior year, there was a comment about IT controls, and we've had some very extensive conversations with the audit committee about that, and what's being done there, and really kind of revamping or reinvigorating, I guess, the IT and those controls, and looking at that. Cybersecurity issues as well it's a huge topic for cities and towns right now, and really kind of being ahead of the game on all those fronts pays off in terms of a lot of things. There was recent, I think you guys sent an email about a cybersecurity attack in Chicopee, like not that long ago. So it's out there. It's obviously a much bigger deal for a huge corporation who has all this personal data, but it happens everywhere. We had lots of discussions about, kind of quick, well, not quick fix, but, ways to address some of the issues, either cheaply or quickly, in terms of, if department employees aware of, they shouldn't open emails from various, or click on links, or, if the sender looks okay, but the email address, from the sender is not right, those kind of things. Everyone gets them. I got a couple this morning to my email, so that's, not that's the best line of attack, but it's really a key way to prevent, those kind of things from happening. So that was one of the recommendations that got repeated from the prior year. And one of the other ones had to do with student activity funds and making sure the audits that are required by the Department of Ed are done in a timely fashion and when they need to happen. I know that Tom is working on having that, setting up a schedule for those to be done in accordance with the guidelines, and that should be done hopefully within the next couple months or so. So we kind of left it in there as a repeat just because it wasn't done during the audit fieldwork time, and we'll follow up on it again next year. So those are the top three, I guess. No major issues, but.
Any questions?
Yeah,
Mark?
my annual question, did you have a chance to talk to the audit committee absent the presence of any town employees?
2 meetings ago, we had a short independent
Right.
discussion as standard procedure for good audit committees to do that, yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, I've had a few meetings there. I'm trying to remember which one we had discussions at, so, yes.
Any
Ernie
other
Walker
questions?
was, yeah, it's important.
Yeah. I was just going to say, there will be a report with those responses done. I mean, the responses are made and they'll put together, and we'll get those to you
Okay,
once the final report is printed.
sounds wonderful. Yes. Well, thank you very much for your
You're
hard work,
welcome.
and
Nice
thank
to
you to
see
the
you.
audit committee. Yes. I'd like to move on to the new sidewalk, I believe.
Are we going to, you're going to vote to accept this report?
Do we have to vote to accept it?
I think historically you have.
We have? Okay,
I
is there a
believe so.
motion to accept?
Yes, I place a motion on the table that we accept the auditor's report as delivered.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Chief?
We were asked to come here to discuss the Knollwood project and make a recommendation as far as timelines, as far as implementation of construction projects. Go ahead.
My understanding is that the petitioner wanted to move and have it completed this winter, and then it went in front of the school committee, and the school committee recommended to wait until there were no students in the area before construction began. And so we definitely wanted a full vetting of what your views were.
Last month, the Traffic Safety Committee meeting met. We discussed doing it during the school year, waiting till school ended, and we felt safety-wise, it was in the best interest to wait till school was finished to do the project.
Well, we're looking at, with the extended project, right now, Knollwood Drive, it's pretty chaotic there in the morning. In order to take that amount of traffic off of that street and trying to divert it to another location, in order to start the construction project, I don't think it would be beneficial to the other neighboring neighbors and surrounding streets. All we would do is just try to increase the amount of traffic that is in that area and concentrate it in a different location. Right now, and plus putting in construction equipment on Knollwood Drive, there's several trees that have to be taken down, and our concern is there's only one way in. There's no, there's one way in, there's one way out of Knollwood. There's nowhere to divert traffic. So it's basically like a funnel going into that area. And by putting additional construction equipment, it's just going to jeopardize the safety of the students right now and the parents.
Any questions?
I have for the town manager, are we on track for construction award and start of work at the conclusion of school, do you know?
We will be, yes.
Okay.
The plan was to design the project winter and put out to bid. So we will be on schedule, yes.
So no noted problems on timeline?
No.
Okay.
And I would probably enhance the timeline, to probably make the project run a lot faster and smoother without the additional traffic and pedestrian issues there.
We learned our lesson with center school and doing the sidewalk over there and the raised crosswalk at the same time school was in session, having to put up fencing and have police officers out there for safety of the children. So it's that was a learning experience with that project. So we'll try to avoid that again.
And I think speaking to DPW, they said it's not going to be a quick project. This is going to take many, many weeks. This is not a 3-week or 1 month. It could go beyond that. I guess one of the things that we keep hearing is that right now it's very dangerous for the children. Is there anything we can put in place to make the situation better? than what it currently is before we do the big fix of the sidewalks?
That's something I would have to look at and get back to you.
We've evaluated that area quite extensively. This is not a new issue. This is something we've been dealing with for over a decade. The problem is, anytime you put a neighborhood school in a residential area, that borders a major thoroughfare, which is Wolf Swamp Road, there's no other way to put those vehicles. The best answer for this situation is to have kids walk to school, limit the amount of vehicles in the area, and as we know, that's probably not practical, and people don't feel that's an option at this point. Limit the amount of vehicles, increase the amount of public transportation. I mean, but we have a small area. But we deal with this at every one of the elementary schools. It's that 20 minutes before and after school where there's congestion and people want to pick up their children or drop them off.
But I think in front of other schools, we have one side of the street you can't park. And here they were describing parking on both sides of the street and then people trying to walk in between. So should we be putting signs up on no parking on the left side or the right side or something?
There are no parking signs on the
school side.
East side of the on the street as you're entering.
Okay, so people are just illegally parking.
Yes, which we've gone and taken care of. You know, I have the evening day shift officers floating around to all the schools because there's illegal parking going on at all 3 elementary schools.
Okay.
During dismissal. Primarily really during dismissal. So they float around to all 3 elementary schools taking care of that issue on a weekly basis amongst other high school traffic issues. And so it does get taken care of.
The only question I had is, are we going to transmit anything back to the petitioner? Is there any communication going back to the petitioner as far as the timeline?
Well, if this board agrees that we could definitely say that the board accepts the traffic committee's recommendations.
Do you have the petitioner's information?
I will get it, yes.
Okay. Since they apparently were asking what we were going to do.
I've had a very good open dialogue with the petitioner regarding this. I've expressed my concerns regarding the safety and what my recommendations was going to be prior to coming here, so.
Okay.
And I think what compounds this is a new project. It isn't just replacing an existing sidewalk. And it's a lot more extensive than just putting up the forms and pouring concrete. A little more extensive than that.
Since we have them both here, any other questions?
I mean, I'm not trying to design the process here. You know, I guess my question is, you know, I live in the Wolf Swamp School District. 35 years ago, my kids went to school there. Like you said, this isn't a new problem. It's been around at least that long. Although the kids seem to have walked to school, maybe more than, I don't know. But I guess the question is should we be trying some kind of traffic system of, you know, I know that people line up. I'm going to say whatever that is, going west on Wolf Swamp Road, and they try to swing into the school and that, you know. I just don't know if there's a system that works, but clearly having people willy-nilly parked all over Norwood doesn't seem to be doing the job, and I'd certainly support if it took a little bit of, you know, some changes between now and the end of the school year to make that area safer.
It's interesting you mentioned that. We were meeting at the school traffic safety committee meeting the other day, and that's one of our discussion items. And we're brainstorming different ideas and concepts of how rerouting the parking lot, putting in an additional pad for parking where the playground area is. So we're beginning that process, but there's a cost factor too. So, but it's something we are evaluating, and we'll continue to do so with them.
Thanks.
Well, if you come up with a solution, you need more funding, or you're concerned about that, definitely come before the select board.
I'd be willing to, anybody who wants to share any ideas as far as the engineering of that would be great.
You just said that on air. You're going to get all sorts of emails now.
Well, you just said on there if you needed more money, too.
Yes.
It seemed as a pharaoh.
Did you see him taking the notes?
Well, we
Oh,
really
that's-
appreciate the
thanks,
work
Chief.
you're doing and coming in.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for your time.
Thank
Thank
you. Moving on to the Green Community and the Energy and Sustainability Committee.
Don't forget the senior housing task force discussion.
Oh, yeah, but that's, these, I want people who are here to.
I'm here.
Good evening. I'm Andrea Chasen, 236 Crestview Circle, currently chair of the Energy and Sustainability Committee, and we're here to give you an update on what's happening with that and the green communities. And I wanted to provide, of course I should have pulled that ahead of time, some information. And let me just give this report around.
And are you here with the committee? You could go ahead and pull it.
With the committee, but
you
I'm
could-
on the committee.
You're on the committee, you want to pull a chair up? Thank you.
Okay, so you're on the roll.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. What you have before you, I wanted to give you a little bit of an update about what the Energy and Sustainability Committee looks like at this point, what we've been involved in, and what some of the ideas that we have for projects and that may help with developing a good pathway for getting more green community money. First of all, we now have a complement of 8 members, and one of the things I'd like to tell you is that we have, aside from these 2 wonderful people over here, additional people, and we have a nice array of members who are a part of other committees within the town, and so we're able to cross-pollinate, hate to, no pun intended, but cross-pollinate information back and forth between the school committee, the tree committee, recycling, and what we're doing is as a result, having a better communication and hopefully creating less siloing of the work that we are interested in doing and getting much more commitment from the other members of the community around this, which is very helpful. Just to get you up to speed, for those of you who may or may not know, and by the way, Dave Miller and I did meet with our new town manager this past week to give her a heads up about this as well, so she has some of this information already. We became a green community in 2013, and we have committed to various requirements as a result of being a green community. One of them is that we would continue to really improve energy efficiency use and try and cap our energy efficiency, not cap, keep reducing it by minimum of 20% within 5 years of the designation, which would have been 2018. We have, as of today, received and hopefully spent by the end of this week the $155,000 that we had from the green communities in 2013. That was given to us. We need to completely spend that before we can apply for any additional money, and it's my understanding that at the end of this week, there will be, we will have fully obligated and spent that money on the LED lights, as I understand it, but we can get clarification on that one. So one of the things that has been going on, and in a minute I'm going to turn to Dave Miller, who's been doing a yeoman's amount of work on getting information about what we have done to date, is that we have looked at some of the low-hanging fruit here in the town that would allow us to both improve our energy efficiency and reap some financial benefits as a result of doing that. And one of the things, Mark Gold, I'm delighted that he said that as of this past week, we finally have signed the contract to own these streetlights. We have information about how we'll be saving money going forward in this report on that, and increasing the savings after the bonds are paid off, as well as on the actual ownership of these streetlights and the LED lighting that will give us some savings. So we had our first meeting in October with the new Green Communities Coordinator for this Western Mass area, who's Mark Rubinski, and he came to our meeting to share with us what's going on with Green Communities and how we can best perhaps go forward and look at getting additional support from the state on the Green Communities money. I do want to point out that in a minute, Dave is going to take this over. We're one of 240 communities around the Commonwealth that are designated as a green community. And we have, as I said, received $155,000 that gone to help with the offset of the purchase and the street lighting going forward. But we have been leaving a lot of money on the table as a result of that, and there is a good deal of information, and I believe Lynn has got it as well, about how other communities have been using Green Communities money and receiving significant amounts of monies going forward. As I understand it, the grant application is now being offered for the 2020 year, and so we actually are in a good place to start looking at what we can put together as an application to go forward to get some funds for 2020 for some of the projects that we have in mind. But before we go into that, I'd like Dave to give an overview, if he would, of what he has learned about how we have been providing energy efficiencies and looking at where we can go forward and increase our energy efficiency possibilities.
Thank you. I'm David Miller, 68 East Greenwich Road. I've given you a handout that 3 sheets, and I'll try and be quick in my review of this. This information was generated by electrical and gas utility audits that took place in 2018. So I'm going to ask you to look to the first page, and this is the Long Meadow Schools electric upgrade that occurred in 2019. I'll ask you in particular to look at the second column, second column, which is the project investment. You can see that the total amount for the schools was $430,000. This has been completed in all but the high school. There's a little bit more work that needs to be done here. My understanding is that that'll be done over the Christmas vacation. The utility incentive, the third column, is $286,000. That's what they put in. And the town's investment is $143,000. You look at calculated savings, which is the amount of money that the town realizes by having placed LED lights and some other electrical improvements, is $143,000 over the course of the project. And basically, the way this is structured is that the savings that the town generates each month will be returned, as we understand it, to Eversource to pay this off. And you can see that the return on investment in the next column over is roughly 2 years. It's magical, in fact, how this came about, and my guess is that the utility said, we've got to get this done. How much is it going to cost? How much will it take in 2 years? Oh, by the way, the town's responsibility is 2 years' worth, and that's going to be a total of $143,000. So that's a very nice outcome for the town. And you can see that the town savings going forward in years 3, 4, and thereafter will be roughly $75,000. Now that, of course, all depends upon the cost of electricity, how much electricity is used, how many new electrical implements are placed. But the point is that it does represent, I think, a considerable savings for the town. In addition, for the first 2 years, there's a net yearly income of $3,000, which is in the last column. I think what I'll do is I'll run through these 3 quickly, and then if you have questions, I'll invite any. The next one is the town buildings upgrade, and here it's sort of an interesting outcome, and I have to tell you, we're not sure how this actually plays out. But if you look at the 4th column, project investment, the total at the bottom is $107,000, and the utility incentive magically is also $107,000. We're not sure exactly how this is being done. This was all concluded under the prior town manager's watch. And so far, we haven't been able to determine precisely what the contract states because we can't find the contract. But the fact of the matter is that basically, if you look at the calculated monthly savings, which is column G, each month's savings, if applied over 2 years, would pay this off. And my assumption, again, is that the same process works here. It's just that the town's incentive is really paying that off in the 2-year time. There is a cash flow at the end of the year of $1,800, but again, the savings are going to be, if you look at column C, $22,000 a year going forward in years 3, 4, and 5, again, depending on all of the variables that we mentioned previously. Now,
Do you have any questions?
now I'm going to let.
Was the work in page 2 done, completed?
The work in page 2 is completed. That is what I've been told.
So I think this was the work that was done a couple of years ago.
No, this is new work. Remarkably, it gets complicated. The work was actually not done by the contractor that I had originally dealt with. When I turned all the data over to the town manager, to Mr. Crane, he then went about finding yet another subcontractor to do the work. But this is new work. It's really quite remarkable, the changes that have occurred in electrical light generation, as you well know, Mark, are changing very rapidly, and replacing the old reasonably efficient fluorescent lights with LED lighting in the same configuration saves, again, a significant amount, about a 4-fold savings. So I believe these were done. Are there any other questions? I suppose I should take the electric.
I just had a real quick one. 502 fixtures at Storrs Library?
That's what it says.
Wow, okay. Is that Christmas lights?
Good question. Okay, let's move on to the gas audit. This was an interesting story. It took quite a bit of time to get the information from the auditor. And so by the end of 2019, we were finally given the information, and the question to me was, well, can we get all this work done? Well, obviously, we needed to sit down with our committee first, and then with the select board, town manager, or people who would be responsible for this. So the answer was no, we can't get it done before January 1st. So they said, well, I think basically we have to spend some money. Why don't we do the fire station for you? So they funded the fire station completely, and that's the first one. And that is saving, the amount there was $34,000. That's saving us $10,000 by their estimate each year in energy consumption. And basically, the work that was done here was primarily air sealing, so placing air dams around the roof wall interface, around windows, doors, hatchways into the attic, things that apparently are now recognized as being major sources of heat loss, and this was their contribution. Now, we didn't have all of these done, so the next group are the Ready Group, and this constitutes 4 buildings, Wolf Swamp, Glenbrook, Williams, and the Senior Center. The total amount is in the second column there, and you can see that that's $68,000. The gas company, as a rule, provides 70% of the cost, and they expect the town to pick up the other 30%. However, as our discussions went along last year with Mr. Lendway, who is the representative of Rise Engineering, which is the company that did this auditing for us, he implied that there may be room in some instances for the gas company to raise their incentive. Now, he is currently involved in the Merrimack Valley catastrophe of last year, so we've not been able to get a hold of him, but he's promised us another interview starting January 1st. He did note that these prices, which are now almost 2 years old, may go up, so we'll have to review that. But just as a means of comparison, I offer you that the way this would work is that the gas company incentive is $48,000. The town's piece of that is $20,000. If you look over at town yearly savings, you can see that that would be $13,000. So one option that the town might consider is, for example, getting Green Communities money for the $20,000, or perhaps there's money elsewhere that you could find. But the point is that in a year, you're going to make back $13,000 of that over gas savings. Now, the next group is a group of buildings that require some prior work, and you'll see in the far right column I've put some numbers there that are referenced down at the bottom as notes. These are buildings basically that are older. They have old knob and tube wiring, and before new insulation or work of that sort can be done, the contractor has to be satisfied that a certified electrician has looked at the wiring, made sure that it's not working, and it's safe to work around. In addition, there's a fair amount of asbestos in the American Legion building. And lastly, a vapor barrier is needed in each of those buildings to make the work capable of going forward, and they don't include that as part of their work. So they expect the town to do those three elements, and there is no cost associated with that. So we would have to figure out, get a contractor or some knowledgeable person to look at those buildings and decide how much it's going to cost. And as you will see, if I can skip to not prepared, the Storrs Library falls into that category of being outside of the range of reason. Because there's a suspended ceiling apparently in much of the Storrs Library as we have here, but because it's old construction, there has to be a barrier that's placed in that suspended ceiling, and that's cost prohibitive. So that the rate of return on that piece becomes 47 years, and the gas company isn't willing to do it. Now, as any of you know who've had home audits done by Mass Save, the first time I had mine done, they were willing to do certain things. By the third time I had it done, they were willing to put in extra insulation in my ceiling, even though my attic was very well insulated. It didn't meet the latest code, which I think is R48. They were also willing to put dams around the places where my exhaust fans go to try and seal those off. So as time goes on, I think the energy companies are working more diligently to try and refine the process and make the energy process more efficient. So it's quite possible that as time goes on, Storrs Library conceivably could fall within that realm of being reasonable for them to work on, but it doesn't now. So if I may go back to the prior work required, the total there is $77,000. The town's payment would be $25,000, but the payback there is only $5,000 a year. And you can see that's reflected in the return on investment is almost 5 years. Then lastly, Blueberry Hill is virtually ready to go, but the difficulty there is that the evaluator felt that the price he'd been given by his subcontractor was too high. He wanted that to be reevaluated, and then I gave this information to Mr. Crane, and this piece of it didn't go any further. So that and the town hall, upon which we had not generated any information, are not prepared to be done. So that's where we stand with the audit. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Richard?
Yeah, in Storrs Library, did you ever get an estimate on what the town's savings would be there?
No.
Okay.
I didn't. It is from my recollection is that it would be something like $4,000 or $5,000 a year. But the problem is that it exceeds, I think they have a window that's 5 years or 6 years, And if you're much beyond that, they don't think it's worth doing the investment.
Are any of these savings being captured?
Right now, the only one that's being captured is the fire station, because the others have not been done. Now, for the electrical work, all of those presumably are being captured and then returned to the entity that did the work.
But the capturing of that 10,000, is that going into a special fund? Or is that just general fund?
It's just, no, it's a reduction, it's actually a reduction in our utility bill.
Yeah, I know, but we were paying the money. I'm saying, where is the money going now? Are we leaving it within the base budget, or are we putting it into a construction fund to do some of these other projects?
There's been no adjustment to the budget, Rich. So it has stayed within the budget.
Okay, so then we don't move forward on these programs then with the savings. It just stays in the budget, and they...
At this point, that's all that has been done, is just stayed in the budget.
Unless we create a
Okay, well, I mean,
policy.
there's a pretty substantial amount of money on savings if we took a 5-year program, just for 4 or 5 years, and took the savings and put it in to get the other ones done, and then get the work done, and then let the money wash back. But I'm talking about a funding source at this point that is already they're going to have a savings, so basically the budget's being increased by that much.
No, I understand. I guess at some point in time, we would reduce those line items and put it into a special project type of line item to move forward.
Yeah, because I mean, if we have a true savings right now, $10,000, well, that funds Glenbrook first year.
You can add that to the additional electrical savings that are happening, as well as the fact that we didn't lay out any money for the electrical upgrades, so that, I mean, in a sense, even though we weren't charged for it, and we weren't anticipating it, we do have a savings for having upgraded the electrical work. I think that's your page 2. And we're showing a savings there, as well as in the actual yearly income right now from the electrical work in the schools.
Right.
So that's 3,000, 2,000 plus the 10,000, that's 15,000 a year right now that we are actually savings from that line item in the utility company.
But I think with the fire department, it was completed just last December.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the budget was already started, and, it would have been hard to realize at that time to make that projection. So going into FY '21, there should be a reduction noted as far as the expenditures to date and so on and so forth.
Yeah, because it seems like, Paul, it could be a 3 or 4 year payback, and it'd be all done. If these figures are even close to being accurate.
But they're recommending we file in February for the green communities.
Well, I understand what they're saying. I'm just saying, right now, there's money on the table. There's $10,000 savings right there that's still in a budget that's going to be spent. And I'm just saying, if it is a true savings, instead of supplementing the budget, why don't we slip it into a fund and do this energy program in about 3 years, and then let the money go wherever they want it, but just do the program instead of, we got plenty of projects for the green grants. You know that. But this one here, I mean, if it's going to be a holistic program, which I'm sure you intended, then it should be self-funding, and the money's being generated for the program to move forward. It just needs to be managed.
Yeah. Again, for the fire department, we're going 5,000 because only half of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, because 2 years, it takes the next 4 projects and funds them.
Sure, yeah.
Boom. And then when you get those savings coming in, that's 13 plus 10, that's 23. That automatically funds the next year.
It should.
I mean, it's like a 3 to 5 year program, and it's done.
Plus the savings from the streetlights.
Right, plus the savings from the streetlights. That's just...
Going to be realizing too. And
That's just scotch and soda money, right?
I wouldn't know.
That could come from
Mark?
I was actually going to suggest something similar to Richard, but I was just going to ask Paul whether, for example, in fiscal year 2021, as we prepare that budget, we could take, and I'm just looking at the gas for the Wolf Swamp, Glenbrook, Williams, and Center School, and reduce the budget by $13,848 and put that $13,848 into, what I'll call utility capital kind of thing. So, clearly it's I don't know if it's an operating, but it's a capital budget, but that then pays for half of it if this is truly a 2-year payback kind of thing.
Well, now that Dave has gone over this a little bit, what I'd like to say is that if you look at the gas component of it, green communities can be used for looking at doing some of this. We can apply for green communities money, so when we look at what the town payment is, that can be something that can go into the application for green communities money. And I don't know, but this is something to ask our coordinator, putting things like the vapor barrier into Story's library, because Green Communities has funded other communities in terms of preparing to even do their conservation work. That may be something that we can actually look at doing. And so it's not just our saving town money, which is critically important, but every time we do an energy conservation such as this, we're also reducing our greenhouse gases and starting to hit our baseline, or improving our baseline, and continuing to support what we need to do to be part of the green communities and continue to receive money. And what my understanding is that we keep tackling whatever is the next level of the lower hanging fruit. And right now, the gas component is certainly that. What we would need is, at this point, though, to deal with the American Legion, even though they're not huge savings, that we would realize at the moment, whatever work has to happen at the American Legion to improve it, to make it user-friendly, we're going to need to deal with these issues of asbestos, and we would probably want to improve the overall comfort level there, which we would do if we were able to insulate it better and make it more usable. So I think it would be good. I mean, one of the recommendations, I think, from our committee is that we would ask to have an electrical audit to see what the knob and tube wiring is in those, the three buildings, the American Legion, Community House, and the Police Department, correct? And then, as well as what would an asbestos removal be for the American Legion, which is what my understanding is where the asbestos really is, to look at that. And I don't know if we have people who are on staff at DPW who could do the electrical? No?
Oh, they could possibly do the electrical evaluation, but not asbestos. I thought you were going to asbestos.
Not the asbestos, I understand that. And I don't know what it would cost, but is that something that we can look into and get information back to you?
Your price seems very, very, very low on that, if there actually is asbestos.
There's no charge for the asbestos removal.
That has nothing to do, that's saying that has to be done.
Yeah, I know it said it has to be done. Okay, oh, yeah, that's right, the town payment, yeah, okay,
Yep.
right.
The remediation is a different issue.
Yeah.
Mark?
I think a more fundamental question is, we're going, if we haven't already, we will be using up the first round of green community money. What is the second round potential funding? And what are our priorities for using it? Is it this list, or is it, a boiler somewhere or something? And how do we have the appropriate group prioritize projects that are eligible for however much additional green community money there is? And I'm asking questions that I don't have answers for, because it could be our capital planning group who assesses priorities. It could be energy and sustainability project group that does, it could be the DPW. But I think we need to find out how much money there's going to be available, and then find out where it's best spent.
Well, I propose that the select board, in their wisdom, decide which groups in town have their oar in this, get those groups together, get them together quickly so that we can prioritize them, bring them back to you, and get this hopefully in the water by February, which is when we have to have the grant done, the grant application. But I think a collaborative effort. One of the things that has been disturbing to us is the fact that $155,000 has sat there for 5 years unspent. And I think you're representing that, Mark, is that let's get off the dime, prioritize things, make a plan, because there's more money next year. You have to remember that this money comes from, in part, a little bit that's on everybody's bill every year or every month when you pay for your electricity, your gas, and whatever. Plus comes from the New England greenhouse gas initiative. So the money is going to be there. It may not be as much, but my understanding is that we can get up to, and this is based upon the town's size, $150,000 or $200,000 each year. So we should just get going on it.
Yeah, we have a new sheriff in town. Here's our new sheriff. And I would anticipate that we will not see those funds sit for 2 to 3 years.
I agree.
I think this program, doesn't this program fall back on underneath the town manager directly?
To submit the application, yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, those days are gone.
Good.
These are new days. And Lynn is taking notes on everything we say, so.
Taking names.
Yeah, taking names and checking the list, and it's close to Christmas time. I understand your stress. We also have some of the equal points of stress, but to keep talking about it, it's not going to get us out of it. But in the meantime, this individual will get us out of those problems.
Good.
Because Lynn is going to communicate back to this board if there's additional needs that she needs in execution of her duties, I'm sure, too. And a need for task force to be developed and whatever, so.
I would just also recommend that the board consider maybe a warrant article at the annual town meeting for some seed money. Most of this stuff is under the $25,000 that wouldn't go to the capital planning committee, but those things that don't make it through the green communities, it could supplement and just have that much more to get the ball rolling. $50,000 or something is.
Well, you're on the committee.
Yeah.
How active are you on the identification of larger projects?
Well, I think this board and the school committee both voted a series of 5 goals I think it was like 4 years ago. One of them was that one of the criteria that capital planning was supposed to be considering is conservation. And my understanding is that has never been implemented. I think if we really move that and let the capital planning know and school committee know that that's got to be one of the criteria, we might start identifying more projects coming forward. These projects were brought in front of capital plan, and they were, my understanding is the chair came in front of us and said it was discouraged to move forward on these projects at this time. So I think we're going to get more information now on whether we're going to go forward with it. I like Paul's idea. There were 2 issues you mentioned I found very interesting. One is, are you saying you should go back and do another audit? Because you said every time we go back to Mass Save, we get a different answer. So are you recommending that you get back to square one and do these again?
Well, no, not for the electrical audit. We may be forced to at least review the numbers, if not the actual work that has to be done on the Columbia Gas project, simply because the data is so old. So that, I don't think he's going to have to redo the whole thing, but I think he's going to have to look at his costs to determine whether the numbers are the same.
And I was fascinated why you said that we might be able to take the prior work required and roll that into Green Communities money, because that means we got to go back and find out what these quotes are, see if that's really true, because then we can deal with a lot of the issues at American Legion before we roll up and get that conservation work done. So maybe there has to be a little more groundwork to be done before we see these projects completed and ready for Lynn to evaluate.
May I just suggest one other thing, and I'm not sure how this works, but we were given these numbers as estimates of how much we're going to save over the course of the year. How do we know that those are real? And I would think that the Green Communities Committee or the Energy Committee would be willing, with the direction of the town, to look at some things, because I realize this is going to take a lot of time to track this down. And I'm sure that Paul doesn't have the time to do it, nor any of the people who work with him. But if the town were willing, I certainly would be willing to go back and look at, how much gas are we consuming each month? What's the cost now? Are we really saving it at the fire station? Or is this all just a pipe dream?
That's what the prior town manager was saying. He said, let's do the fire station, let's evaluate to see if these numbers are coming out. And then he says, before we move ahead on other projects.
The fire station's been done, right?
Right, the fire station's been done, so the numbers for the past 6 months.
Well, that was a year now.
almost a year now, will be able to tell us, are we really hitting 10,000, or is this
Pipe dream.
pipe dream? Yeah.
But Marie, and gas is, different because you don't know, is it colder or hotter or whatever it is. But, for example, when we're working on the streetlights, we know that we need a X number of lumens light, and we now have 150 watts that do it, and they're saying that it's 27% of the wattage. So 150 watt goes to like 33 or 34, and 100 watt goes to 26 or 27. So you can calculate, you're replacing electricity, you can calculate the number of watts, and whether we're paying 14 cents a kilowatt hour or 18 cents a kilowatt hour, you still know you're going to save, something around 72 or 73% of your electric bill, and so I wouldn't focus a whole lot on the electric part of it if the improvements are based on wattage. On the other hand, on the gas bills, it's based on therms, and you never know, like your own home, you don't know how many therms you're using, so.
Well, but you have the advantage of heating degree days.
Yeah.
And so
Well, yeah.
you can use that to calculate how much you, assuming you keep your
Right.
thermostat at 70 degrees or 65 this year as opposed, and last year, should be able to figure out whether you're making progress or not.
It's my understanding also that the state has something, the Mass Insight program, where we can actually go in and see what our use is, and I think there's a historical record, and we're asking that Dave be allowed access to that, and the town manager has already submitted a letter recommending that he can do that, so that may also help with looking at whether these numbers are actually proving to be accurate. The other thing is that I don't remember his name, but the gas company, I'm going to call him that.
Oh, Ross Lindway.
Right. He's willing to come to a meeting in January to go over these numbers with us at an Energy Sustainability Committee meeting, to look at them more clearly and look at potentially be able to tell us how accurate or what is going on there. And at that time, we can also ask him if it's possible. What was the reason why we couldn't do a town hall audit at that time? Do you remember?
I don't know. I don't remember if I was ever told.
If we can get the town hall involved in getting an audit on that one too, so it would give us a sense, because that's an older building as well. So at least we would be able to come with complete numbers. Mark's idea about prioritizing these things is really a very good idea. I mean, I don't know if there are boilers in the older schools that need to be replaced, the refrigeration needs to be replaced. However, I would like us to be able to get something rolling and get information coming in, because every year that we don't go after money leaves money on the table that we didn't get for something. And so if we can get as complete a number as possible for January, but the grant closes out in February, that's when they're due. And so I'd like to be able to get something in this year for some activity going forward. So perhaps in January, we can come back with a more complete recommendation to you all based on whatever we can pull out between now and then, so that we can hit the grant application date.
I understood correctly when he came to speak. It's not as dire as it sounds about us leaving money on the table, because there's a cap on so much money a town can get, right? So we're just slower getting to our cap, but we still have the ability, as long as the program's still there, we have the ability to get to our cap.
There is a cap, but there's also different grant applications. Once you exhaust one thing, is what Mark Babinski was telling us, so that it may come out of green communities, but money, this open one, but there are also once you start hitting some of those caps, you start designating or getting into other grant application opportunities. So
okay,
that's something to consider down the road, and we need to get more familiar with the overall state programs that they have. And there are also other applications that we can be applying for once we have a sense of what it is that we need to do. And the utility companies are still a source of support for these things, so I don't want to leave them on the table either.
And I want to thank you, Lynn. I know you just came on board, and you had to get that report in, and thank you very
Oh,
much.
yes, that got done.
That was a lot of work, so thank you for getting that report in for us.
That was great. The DPW really assisted with that, and just to their credit, it got done.
Oh, fabulous, thank you. Any other questions for energy and sustainability? Well, thank you very much for the hard work. I'm really excited about us getting some of these things done
It's a
this year.
great committee. Anybody wants to come participate, feel free.
Thank you. All right, we'll move back up to Senior Housing Task Force. Richard,
Wow.
you want to tell us a little bit?
Yes, I will.
Last but not least.
Well, let's see, what, about 4 weeks ago, we sat here and we chatted and we formed a kind of allegiance between Mark, myself, not Mark Gold, Mark Strange and myself, and we signed a two-person task force to look into the aging population needs in our community. So we did meet, and we had coffee, and we talked about it, and I've got a thing I'm going to read, a one-page statement I'm going to read tonight that is kind of Mark's thoughts and my thoughts put together and where we think we should be going. It said, according to the UMass Donahue Institute, nearly 25% of the Lower Pioneer Valley's population will be 65 or older by the year 2035, which is a 10% increase from 2015. Currently in Longmeadow, according to our town clerk, we have 15,340 residents, with 4,629 of them being at or over the age of 60, which is just over 30% of our population. As our residents age, their needs change, particularly in the areas of housing and transportation. Navigating stairs and getting to appointments become increasingly more difficult as people age past 65 and sometimes before. Town meeting recently approved funding to construct a new adult center, which will expand certain offerings to our seniors, and the select board enhanced the benefits associated with property tax abatement. But as I said, what else can we do? This is a question I would like to answer through our proposed senior task force. We envision a 9-member task force to be appointed by the select board in early 2020 that will reinforce our collective pride in our seniors. Longmeadow is represented by the quality of our educational system, sustained value of our single-family residents, and the socioeconomic balance of our citizens. Accordingly, much of our community's resource and programmatic efforts support this quality of life, and these resources are well spent, in our opinion. However, to proactively meet the emerging needs of our senior community, we need to start planning and focusing our attention on senior issues now to provide a more holistic community in the future. We need to increase our efforts towards embracing the needs and values of our senior citizens. Now is the time for the leaders, for our leaders to provide adequate and thoughtful community direction for meeting the needs of our ever-increasing senior population. Mark and I recently met to brainstorm some ideas for a senior task force. Initially, we see its purpose as being a meaningful exploration and ultimately a roadmap for what resident seniors needs and will need over the next 20 to 30 years. For example, how do we expand housing options for seniors who can't easily navigate multi-level or maintain their properties? Right now there are limited options for seniors looking to downsize and stay in Longmeadow. Also, how can the town facilitate communications and connections among seniors who may want to socialize or find a roommate? We also discuss ways of increasing transportation issues. There is much more to explore and plenty to discuss, so we look forward to getting started as soon as possible with this task force. We put the acronym on this as SNAP, Senior Needs Assessment Program. It's a SNAP. It should be easy. We envision 9 people. And I've talked to Jim over at the senior center, the adult center, and be following under the town manager with directions of some of her staff that could feed into this. We envision a very, very broad range task force that will look at a multiple array of issues, and we're not talking 2 to 3 years, we're talking 10 to 20 years out. So what do we need to do? Particularly shocking is that we are already at 30% of our population at above 60 right now, and it's growing quickly. And I said, it's way ahead of where I thought it was. I thought we were going to be there in like 2025, but we're already there now. This is according to some pretty current figures, too. This is not based on the 2010 census. This is based on very accurate information coming from our town clerk. So we wanted to mention it here and on camera tonight. We also envision very likely putting a press release out to get it in the local newspapers to say we're going to put this community, this task force together, and to try to get the most robust committee we can. We envision this study may take 5, 6, 7 months. I mean, it's going to be long. We don't want a quick snap. We want this to take some time to get out. We also could fall back on a lot of the resources that the DPW committee went through when they explored all the properties in our entire community. So I would tell the community to go back and look at what they did to research and see where a lot of pieces of property are at now, like the Senegod property and all these types of things for opportunities for advancement. Now, I understand you're also dealing with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission right now on one of their reps on the water tower property. What is it, 17.5 acres?
It's 20, yeah.
Yeah.
22?
17, probably, because there's that water towers.
And he'll be getting a presentation on that next week.
Okay. And there's a lot of things coming up, but now's the time. I mean, with already 30% of our population, that's a fairly large segment of our population, and the needs are going to be expanding instead of contracting on that population for it. So that's where we leave it. That's what we'd like to do. We'd like to go ahead and say put a press release out and go ahead and get a task force put together, as we've done with other ones. Come in and have them interview here.
Should we put a motion on the floor to establish the committee, the task force?
It'd be nice.
Just a couple questions. Richard, you indicated a couple of categories. Excuse me, you said housing and transportation. I was just wondering if we want to, create some kind of an area for this group to work in. I mean, I agree with you. It's to assess the needs of seniors over the next 20 years, and I don't have any problem with that, but they can get into, without some guidance, they can end up down a rat hole or down an alley that may not be as productive as opposed to trying to guide this group somewhere, whether it has to do with housing or transportation or affordability of living in Long Meadow or something like that. So that's my one comment. The other comment is that as much as I like your acronym, the federal government beat you to it. SNAP is the food stamp program.
Well, that's okay.
I don't know that we should.
We can change it around. Yeah. They took it from us.
Oh, is that one? Okay.
Yeah. That's federal. We're local. Yeah, we could have anything, Matt, or Mark. And Mark, I agree with what you're saying. I think the best thing we could do is likely get the group formed, let them come back with a matrix and place before our board, and let's talk about the matrix of where they want to go.
That's fine.
And that's when we can interject what we think.
I think that's good. I just think that we need to give them some structure. I think they need some structure, otherwise they're going to be
true.
Wandering.
Now, will it be, this is an open question, will it be a town manager task force, or will it be a select board task force?
I think it ought to be a select board task force personally, because that way they're accountable back to the community. They have notes that people, I know it's a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
They've got to meet open meeting laws, but with a select board task force. But I think we do want public input and public response, so that would be my input as part of that.
Right. So will there be a lot of coordination with the town manager?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think that would make sense.
Yeah.
The 9 members, is that all strictly public members, or was that including the 2 where you and Mark Strange intended
Well, I
to
don't
stay
think
on?
there would be 2 of us on there.
Okay.
I believe maybe there possibly 1 select board representative on there, but that would be it.
But it makes sense to have a couple of 1 or 2 professionals on it as well, I would think, from the adult center or from other program, unless they're just resource people. I don't know.
And there's a lot of resources out there already in other communities that have tackled this. And I don't think the task is that daunting. I think it's just going to be a matter of correlation or collecting the data and bringing it together and start to assimilate and lay it over what our needs are for the next 10 to 20 years. I don't think they're that much different than any other community.
So are you talking about us interviewing 9 people and putting them on this task force?
Yeah, we had originally recommended a 9-person task force.
Okay.
And however we do that, Marie, we've assigned people before, we've also interviewed. That is open for discussion on the select board on how we're going to deal with, how do we put the committee together.
Because I think we need to know if we're advertising for interviews. And how many positions are we advertising for?
Well, we said 9, but and if we appoint one from the select board as liaison, then an active liaison, not an associate member, then it'd be 8.
Well, how about if you put somebody from the Council on Aging?
Yeah,
So
we
that
could-
might make it seven.
we
You know,
can
in other
have
words, you can look at-
automatics.
Right, you can look
Yeah.
at things like that, Marie, that make it a
Well,
little bit more palatable.
What do you guys want to do? Let's just decide how many are we
I'm doing this for
advertising
the
for
first
so
time,
we can
Marie.
start
Well,
putting it out there.
How about if we bring it back at our next meeting?
Okay.
And
All
so
right.
the question is now is the makeup of the task force,
Okay.
and who may be mandatory requirements that we won't have to worry about recruiting.
Okay.
I mean, should somebody, you know, if we're going to talk housing, should somebody from the Housing Authority be there? If we're going to talk, you know, some other category, like I said, should somebody from the Council on Aging, or somebody from, you know, Philoka, or somebody from,
Okay.
whatever it is. You know, you can imagine they'll get into different areas that you'd want somebody who then has a tie into that.
And we want some people that are just plain inquisitive, too.
Absolutely, but 9's a lot of people, so you can get 6 real inquisitive people and 3
And they
people.
don't need 9 gray hairs like me on that committee. We need to get some younger people that are coming into that, you know. Maybe they're worried about the next 20 years.
Okay, so we'll talk about it a little bit more. There's no vote to be done now.
Get some
We're going to work on
feedback.
composition. You come up, make some recommendations, and talk to
Yeah.
Mark and Richard and Mark,
Get some of those
and see what
deputy
you come up with. All right, so we'll put that on the agenda next time.
Okay.
We'll move on to annual liquor license renewals. How many do we have?
We've got, yeah, I'll tell you what.
You wanna start, Mark?
Sure, Debbie's made I want to thank Debbie House. She's done a lot of the background work for this, and as our manager of liquor licenses. So I'm just going to try to separate this into a couple of different motions. My first motion is to renew the liquor license of the package stores, and I'm going to give you their business information. Four Seasons Wines and Liquors, Long Meadow Package Store, Delaney's Market, and the Bottle Shop. Those 4 all have liquor licenses for the selling of bottled liquor.
And yours
wine.
was a motion to...
Mine is a motion to renew their liquor licenses.
Okay, second.
Any further discussion? Did you get all that, Debbie?
Yes.
All of them? All those in favor? Okay.
And the second motion would be the restaurants that have, serving liquor licenses. So I'm going to make a motion to renew the liquor licenses of the following restaurants in town. One is Grapevine Pizzeria and Restaurant, Iron Chef, Lee Brothers Inn, Long Meadow Country Club, Luigi's Restaurant, Max Burger, I think it's Posto, The Kitchen, The Meeting House, Twin Hills Country Club, and Ume Asian Bistro. I have purposely not included Mes Petites Oiseaux, who is still not open and hasn't met the requirements of any of insurance and inspections and any of that stuff. And as far as I know, they haven't even really come before us to apply for a formal, this would have been it.
They have,
We'll do that sometime already next time.
I'm holding it because they're not open yet.
Oh, okay. Oh, they do have a liquor license?
Yeah.
We gave them a liquor?
We are holding it.
And
because
it's
they're not open.
They're not-
conditional.
Oh, okay, and it's
conditional.
conditional?
Yeah.
Fine, then I'll add Mes Petites Oiseaux then for, under the same conditions as the prior approval then.
Okay, second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? And is that it?
16.
Did we take Franconia?
Franconia, we didn't do.
Is
There's-
Franconia here? Didn't,
No,
they
they're
didn't?
seasonal, they'll renew,
Yeah.
Okay, and they usually
That's
are
our only-
late and there's, yeah. So be sure to let them know. They better be ready first.
Yep,
Yeah. And so they're the only seasonals?
that's, yeah.
Okay, all right. And so, anything else for this evening? No? Is there a motion to,
There is a
Adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? All right, thank you for joining us this evening. We'll have our regular scheduled meeting on the 16th. It's going to be the tax classification. It's going to be a little bit of a long meeting. Well, hope to see you there. Thank you.
Well, that's one way to drum up support.
That's a long meeting, folks.